Okay, siguro to clarify yung kaninang initial na question ko. Based on isa sa mga takeaway ko is that we are compelled in a way to listen, and in the listening and in the pausing, being sensitive. This is an act of humility, and in the humility we also experience awe. There is always something that is revealed that we didn't see it before. Siguro yung original question ko kanina was that ang difference siguro sa akin, medyo cerebral ako. I was trained to break down things, to consciously break down. Minsan di nga siya conscious unconscious na siya. I mean, because of my college training, and also how I was trained as a participant in the art practice. If my training and my response, since you mentioned a while ago, phenomenology is a response to something. When you try to understand it, di mo pang pangunahan. For me, ang concern ko is that minsan parang there is hubris in a way. Parang there's hubris. For me, I have to admit na when I see a picture, my first response is not to see but to break it down. And again, in the fields of communication arts, one of the critical idea was that do not believe on what you see. Parang do not believe on what is the truth that is being laid down to you, because probably there's an ideology, there's something hidden from it. Medyo argumentative, discursive, and siguro parang adversarial lagi. Art students are taught to be adversarial to the truth, or skeptical to the truth, and following your idea of letting the things be themselves. I don't know if that training becomes a hindrance for me to experiencing again the thing in itself in a manner that, what can I do? I was trained that way. So I'm curious tuloy ngayon that, is my training becoming a hindrance for me to be authentic? Yan na lang siguro, to be authentic and to see the things in themselves.
Yeah, I can see we can be obsessed with analysis, knowing the parts, and they're not bad in themselves, no. May lugar naman for analysis, and breaking down, breaking down something into its parts and knowing how they work together, if there's a pattern. Even mathematicians, my good friend Dr. Ninette de las Peñas is working on the mathematics behind indigenous fabrics, and fascinating inquiry into the mathematic behind. And so that's a good example. Mathematicians like Dr. de las Peñas know the mathematics behind the fabric, the indigenous textiles, let's say from Mindanao, or up north. But the weavers themselves, they don't know the math in the sense of the math in the academic mathematics. They don't know that. But they don't need to know that to create something that is beautiful, right? We have to understand that carefully when we say they don't know math. No, of course there's math going on there, but it's not the mathematics in the sense of technical and academic math, because they did not study calculus or geometry or whatever. Like, I always give the example of, let's say, the Banawi rice terraces. I don't know if have you gone to, let's say, Batad, Tony? Nakakit ka naman ng Batad. Ang ganda ng Batad, the rice terraces, no? And it's just 100, hindi pala ganun katanda, the recent research, no? But still hundreds of years old, no? It's astonishing, di ba? If you go to Batad, the irrigation system is still working, no? Pero wala silang degrees they did not have any formal training in engineering. They did not have any formal training in mathematics, right? But they did it. So for sure there was some mathematics that they use, but it's not in the in the sense that we know mathematics as a technical, no? Because they were responding to some practical concern, and they need to survive, they need the food, no? So I ask my students when I teach philosophy of technology, so what's the difference between the rice terraces and the nuclear power plant? Na pareho namang may manipulation of nature. So why is the rice terraces beautiful to behold, and why is the nuclear power plant a monstrosity? You know, we're scared if you stand before it. It's not a work of art, unlike the rice terrace. Pareho namang may manipulation to some extent, no, di ba? The Ifugao, they carved into the mountain. In that sense, photography also, if you manipulate an image, no? But the Ifugao were respectful of their environment. It was not a violent assault upon nature, and it was only appropriate to the extent that they needed food. No? Walang excess. No? And again, true art is always within measure, no? Within the right measure. No? And it's part of art. Now, if it's, you know, if we get anything from that saying ars est calare artem, it is art to hide art. You know, it belongs also to art to keep the hiddenness hidden. No? That's why the rice terrace is a beauty to behold. No? So wala, no? One time again, my wife and I, we were driving from Provence, south of France, back to Munich, and we stopped by a small French town and known for its pottery. And we watched a young French lady working on a pitcher, you know, a jug. You know? And we waited for her to be finished. And I asked when she's done, I said, "Wow, what a work of art you are producing." And she looked at me as like, are you weird? I'm just making a jug. Label na work of art. I thought I was, I was being kind to her to tell her that it's so, but to me it's really a work of art. But but the French lady was working. I'm just making a jug. Don't overread it. Right? So yeah. Yeah, so yung analyzing can also be pinapangunahan. Oh, I have ideas about art. I know about the ano nga yan, the what is that, the slips my yung sa shell,
yung
Fibonacci.
yung Fibonacci.
Yeah, okay.
yung golden ratio.
The golden ratio, right? We have all these ideas, and then parang anything we see, we apply it, no? So sa photography, siyempre ang dali-dali naman sa post-processing. Meron kang layer, i-apply mo yung, di ba? So inuunahan mo yung phenomenon, no? And we're always, that's the problem, no? When we rush ahead, no? Instead of letting the thing first, strike you on its own terms, no? And then take it from there one step at a time. No? Look at Ansel Adams, no? Ansel Adams, no? Diba? How long he took the photographs. I'm not saying that just because you're taking long to take a photograph, that's necessarily good. No? Sometimes you need to act very quickly. No? Let's say photographers covering wars, they have to decide a split second. No? And then their training, their skill, their technical skills will go hand in hand. But again, yung having the eye for the phenomenon unfolding before you. I think that's very, very important in photography.
So, Doc, napansin ko, based on what you explained, that there is wholeness. I mean, I'm not sure if that term wholeness has a specific meaning in philosophy. As photographers, analytical cognition should be applied to it. However, there should be a letting go somewhere in the process for it to be whole. I'm curious on what would be the mode for us to understand phenomenology in photography. What is the practical demonstration of that concept? Is there a way for us to engage the traces as something that can be appreciated by themselves.
Um,
Sabi natin, if I photograph Provence, and then when I go back to Manila, the only thing that I have is the image. So
okay.
looking
Yeah.
at an image is different from me being there. So my concern is that since I only have a trace of that phenomenon that I was me being there,
Mm,
how do I make sense of the photograph? I mean, in the light of Heideggerian phenomenology.
yeah. Yeah. As we were discussing earlier, no, before we went online, no, that in a certain sense, we look at the photo, a still photograph, as like an image that has been fixed in time. No? It's no longer moving. No? In a way, we, as you said, abstract. We abstracted from the reality. We took the image. No? We recorded. Well, when we still used film, no, we recorded it on film. No, the light. No? And now it's printed on paper. No? But again, coming from Heidegger, that's not how we look at things, no? Because a painting is also not moving. A painting, you might say, is also fixed, no? But from a Heideggerian perspective, it's not really fixed and unmoving. It constantly reveals, no? It is not done once and for all. And that's the reason why we have museums now. Uh, you know, the artists themselves, I think, know that their works will go beyond them. No? It it has, it will have a life of its own. No? So a painting might give us the truth about the human being more than the experience of actually being there, and right? Let's say Picasso's Guernica, uh, might tell us more about war, the evils of war, than actually being in a war. So I think we need to understand in a new way what we mean by abstract and concrete, um, or fixed for that matter. Kasi nga, um, Heidegger was also, as I said, profoundly influenced by the ancient Greeks, and speaking of truth, so he would always go back to the Greek experience of truth, which is so different from the way we understand truth now. No? The word that they used was aletheia, or aletheia, which literally means unconcealment. No? So the ancient Greeks understood and experienced truth not as a factual or a correct proposition, which can be verified, negated, etc., etc., but rather it's the experience of, again, of the unconcealment and concealment happening at the same time. So think of your closest friend. If you have a spouse, you will never know your best friend or your spouse, even if you live with them and share the same bed with them for the whole life. Something in them will still remain hidden, and even yourself, something about yourself will remain hidden, which means at the same time you are constantly unfolding. And that's again another thing that's radically new and different with Heidegger. Kasi hindi siya essentialist thinker. By that is meant na the essence of something is not something fixed once and for all. Rather, it is constantly unfolding before your eyes. No? Hindi tapos ang kwento. No? That's why, yun na nga, di ba? Why, look at the gospel, the Gospels are short. It's just four short stories, and we hear it every Sunday. But there's always something new, and it's true with everything. No, a song, a poem, painting, a photograph, a human being. Laging may nakatago. At dahil laging may nakatago, laging may sorpresa. And that's the thing, no? If we preempt something, we're not ready for surprises. Inuunahan mo kasi. You're not open to something that you've never imagined because you did not allow the phenomenon to show itself on its own terms. So Heideggerian phenomenology would also be an openness for something you've never thought of, surprises, no? Yun, no? Kaya
Yung kanina, Doc, medyo sinegue ko doon. Kasi ito ba ang promise ko sa'yo, hindi natin mabanggitin masyado. Thank you for having the patience to explain that. We're saying outside this recording is there is a certain epistemic quality for a photograph that is beyond sensory. The epistemic qualities of an artwork goes beyond what the color is. It's beyond the sum of its parts. So it's beyond if it reveals you of something, well nga, hindi natin pwede mapapangunahan kasi nga you have to let it, quote unquote, let it be. In Heideggerian phenomenology, are we saying that there's a specific register, a truth register or a fact register that is specifically art based on the terminologies that we're using or the intersectional ideas or signification that we're using? It points towards a trajectory of us saying that there is something that is art. So the Banawi rice terraces, it's closer to art. And then a nuclear plant is not. Parang we're building up to that truth register, which is art. Is that correct?
yeah.
Or medyo ano ba?
No, yeah, no, it's okay. Heidegger wrote this essay in 1936. Now, the origin of the work of art. No, I think that's the only time that he actually wrote something on art. And in fact, one of his famous students, Hans Georg Gadamer, said, finally he wrote something about art. No, and in that not an easy read, no, but in that essay, no, he's he spoke of art as the happening of truth. No? Truth is at work. No? And you know, I think some of you might have Googled this. No, they analyze what makes Akira Kurosawa films so good. Bakit? You know what works of art they are. No? What if you try to analyze, ano bang meron kay Akira Kurosawa, no? And somebody did a comparison of Akira Kurosawa and Hollywood, the usual Marvel superheroes, and you see walang nangyayari doon sa Hollywood, in terms of composition, transition, no? Whereas yung kay Akira Kurosawa, may nangyayari, so art is not really just because it's beautiful, it's nice to look at, but at the same time something true is at work. Something, I'm made aware of something at work before me. May nagaganap. Kaya hindi tayo nagsasawa. We never get tired of watching works of so-called masters, classic works of art and music. You never get tired of Beethoven, of Mozart, of Bach, and so on and so forth. Ganun din sa photographs, like I don't know, Eugene Smith. I particularly like Martin Parr, for instance. I never tire of looking at his photographs, because there's something there at work. May nangyayari doon, that speaks to us. And you look at inferior works, no? Ayaw mo nang ulitin. Yung sa simula pa lang, alam mo na yung mangyayari. No? Walang nagaganap na pagtatago. At dahil walang nagaganap na pagtatago, wala ding pagpapakitang nagaganap. Ano? Sabay kasi palagi yan. No? The concealment and unconcealment. Exactly the way the ancient Greeks understood and experienced truth as aletheia, no? as unconcealment. No? Yan, no?
It's a bit presumptuous siguro, or parang medyo sweeping naman siguro for me to say this, no, Doc. In a way, is there something Heideggerian phenomenology is a bit, di naman anti-positivist, no? It's cautious about technology. Some commentaries about Heidegger was that he is cautious of technology, commoditation, or that reductive quality of technology is something that Heidegger is trying to be cautious of.
Yeah. That's as I've said, I would teach philosophy of technology every now and then, and one of the most important texts of Heidegger is the question concerning technology. You know, but let's just make something very clear. You know? Heidegger is not anti-technology.
Okay.
And that's a common misunderstanding, that he is anti-technology, that he wants us to live in the primitive way of life. No. He himself said that's not desirable, and nor is it possible. No. But if you read the question concerning technology, again, as kasi Heidegger is of the mind that philosophy always takes place in language. No? So he always listens to language. No? And if we take a look at the word techne, no? Originally techne is closely related to poiesis. No? Technology originally experienced and understood is poetic. Now, the problem in modern technology, nawala na yung poetic part ng technology. The modern technology is not poetic. No? Rather, it is what he calls framing. No? Masyadong violent. No? It encroaches upon nature. It forces nature to reveal. Look at the Higgs boson, for instance. Diba? They're really obsessed about finding this particle. We keep extracting from the earth. We try to control being. So that's why the modern technology is distinct in that it is no longer poetic. And that is extremely dangerous now, because once techne is dissociated from poiesis, if we listen to our language, makata is makatha, no? And that's the same. Poiein, where we get the word poetry, is to make, no? And techne is also to make, no? To produce. No? So originally, technology is poetic. No? And Heidegger would say towards the end, the point is not to run away from technology, not to curse it as if it's the work of the devil. What we're being asked to do is to confront technology head on, no? Because as dangerous modern technology can be, the salvation also lies within technology itself, no? Because it still keeps within itself the poiesis. No? And what we need to do is to allow, let's say in photography, to allow the poetic part to emerge again. But you cannot force it. No? And Heidegger would always say, all we can do is preparatory. You can't force the issue. You can't program it and make a project out of it.
I'm asking naman the right questions. No? So yun, nagbunga naman kahit paano yung research ko. Although I lack precision in my questions, you are able to respond. And I mean, there is a certain unraveling then in our conversation. No? So thank you there, kasi we are able to articulate things that would probably be amorphous for many. Kaya the good thing with our conversation is that they're introduced to the abstract, the invisible part of photography. If we ask, how do you make practical this conversation that Dr.
Mm.
Barbaza and Tony Cuesta is talking about? How do you make this practical and visible? It's hard for us to answer that because built into our conversation is a certain fluidity, humility. Siguro may konting speculative qualities din in our conversation in the sense that we are able to articulate ideas through words, and yet we are talking about a photograph, diba? Something that is a visual phenomenon. So it's interesting. That also links us back to the fact that the photographic practice is not just the image itself. There is something outside the process of experiencing photography. Actually, I sent you a video of me trying to explain phenomenology in a talk. I was using specularity as an articulated word. How do I find a visual signifier to the phenomenological process in photography? For now, I have settled on the term specularity. I am limited to the vocabulary that photography has. For me to teach photography as phenomenology, it's the subjectivity of the viewership and the agency behind the viewership, the process of viewership. The way I try to explain it also to my students is that a camera is contingent to the process of photography. Before taking a photograph, what is there in that space and time is you. You're the agent there. And the making sense, the letting go is a process of that agent, that subject in that spatial-temporal position. For me, the way I also try to expand siguro yung experience of the students when it comes to photography is that, at least for that specific class, the camera is contingent. You have to be there first. Experience what it is. For what it is, yun muna. Whether it's a person that you're photographing, it's an event, or a concept, or a feeling, or an emotion, or a place, whatever conceptual or sensory perceptual experience that is, you have to be there first. The camera is contingent because it's the tool that we have. To summarize what I'm saying is that I try to introduce this idea that the process of photography is a phenomenon in itself. The camera becomes invisible. It still becomes a prosthesis of your vision, the being there-ness of photography. It's something that a lot of photographers miss in the sense that I have to make this beautiful. Parang ganun eh, parang I have to make this, parang iniisip ko na paano ko to ipopost, ano yung caption, when in fact, be there first. Diba? So yun.